For years, central Tehran has lived under an illusion of permanence. Not calm, never calm, but controlled. A city taught to move around invisible red lines, where certain streets existed only as rumors and certain buildings were never meant to be approached, let alone challenged. Tonight, that illusion has collapsed. What is unfolding is not another protest cycle. This is not a familiar pattern of chants, crackdowns, funerals, and silence. What we are witnessing is the physical convergence of public fury and state power in the most symbolic place imaginable. The capital is no longer holding its breath, it is screaming. At the heart of Tehran, the district long shielded by concrete, steel, and fear has been breached. Not metaphorically, not politically, but spatially. The protective buffer separating the ruling elite from the population has evaporated. Smoke rolls through streets once kept surgically clean. Barricades burn where security checkpoints once stood. The soundscape has changed, from controlled quiet to the low, constant roar of a mass that is no longer dispersing. This is not a demonstration. It is pressure, and pressure reveals weaknesses. To understand how one of the most tightly secured regimes on Earth arrived at this moment, we must step back, not weeks, not months, but days. The collapse did not begin with an organized opposition or a charismatic leader. It began where control is always weakest, at the edges. In the southern districts of Tehran, areas historically treated as expendable shock absorbers for unrest, a routine confrontation escalated beyond expectation. These encounters happen frequently: moral enforcement patrols, verbal resistance, arrests, brief clashes. Normally, the system absorbs the impact and moves on. This time, it didn't. Instead of fragmenting, the crowd held. Instead of panic, there was coordination. Instead of silence, there was transmission. Despite sweeping internet restrictions, footage escaped. Satellite uplinks, encrypted tunnels, improvised networks, tools once used by dissidents in isolation were suddenly deployed at scale. Within hours, what should have been a contained disturbance became a shared national event. Millions were no longer guessing what was happening. They were watching it unfold in real time. The regime's first response followed doctrine. Law enforcement units were surged into the area with the expectation of rapid psychological dominance, tear gas, baton charges, controlled chaos. This model depends on a single assumption: fear will do the work. That assumption failed. When footage emerged of security units retreating, visibly overwhelmed, outnumbered, disorganized, the psychological equilibrium that had sustained the system for decades shattered. The moment people saw authority step backward, something irreversible occurred. Protest ceased to be symbolic. It became directional. By the second day, the geography of unrest transformed. This was no longer a constellation of isolated flare-ups. Movements converged, routes aligned. The city center, long insulated by layers of deterrence, became the destination. Chants changed. The language hardened. This was no longer about reform or grievance. The target was power itself. The regime escalated accordingly, activating paramilitary forces designed to terrorize, intimidate, and exhaust. These units excel in speed and brutality, but they are optimized for fragmentation, not saturation. They thrive when crowds scatter. They fail when crowds absorb. And that is precisely what happened. Instead of breaking apart, protesters adapted. Motorcycle charges were neutralized by terrain manipulation. Narrow streets became traps. Mobility, once the paramilitary's greatest advantage, turned into a liability. Units were isolated, surrounded, immobilized. Exhaustion set in. Morale collapsed. Reports of absenteeism increased. The system began bleeding from 1,000 small cuts. This was not chaos. It was emergent order. As the mass pressed inward, the regime faced a dilemma it had long feared but never fully planned for: the inadequacy of its internal security architecture against a decentralized swarm. The tools built to crush dissent were never designed to repel a human tide, moving without leaders. without schedules, without negotiators. When outer security rings near the leadership compound began to fail, the situation crossed a threshold. The elite protection units tasked with guarding the highest authority found themselves confronting a scenario that doctrine explicitly avoids: prolonged siege in dense urban terrain. At this stage, conventional escalation options narrowed dangerously. Deploying regular army units would introduce heavy armor, mechanized infantry, and overwhelming firepower, but also uncontrollable risk. These forces are composed largely of conscripts, not ideologues. Their loyalty is conditional, fragile, human. Many share bloodlines with the people outside the gates. History has shown what happens when regular soldiers are ordered to fire on civilians they recognize. The leadership knows this. It remembers 1979. It remembers Cairo. It remembers how quickly legitimacy dissolves when obedience fractures. As a result, armor remains idle. Barracks stay sealed. The most powerful instruments of state violence are paralyzed by doubt. This leaves the inner guard isolated. Geography compounds the problem. The leadership compound sits in a dense urban matrix ill-suited for sustained defense. Supply lines are narrow. Access routes are easily blocked. Protesters understood this instinctively. Streets were choked with debris. Vehicles burned not as spectacle, but as infrastructure denial. Entire districts became impassable. Air support offered no relief. Night skies filled with laser interference. Drones cluttered airspace. Helicopters faced unacceptable risk. The defenders were cut off, not just physically, but psychologically. A fortified compound without resupply is not a fortress. It is a pressure cooker. Inside, ammunition dwindles. Fatigue mounts. The noise outside grows louder. The realization sets in: relief may not come. At this point, the regime faces a brutal calculation. One option remains, the final one: total force, no restraint, no crowd control, no ambiguity. This is not policing. It is warfare. In such a scenario, specialized units trained for lethality, not deterrence, would be unleashed. Rules of engagement would vanish. Live fire would replace gas. Trauma would replace fear. The objective would not be dispersion, but paralysis. Simultaneously, intelligence services would activate purge protocols. Communications blackouts would deepen. Coordinators would be hunted. Homes would be raided. Entire networks would disappear overnight. But this option carries catastrophic risk. Mass slaughter demands absolute loyalty from those executing it. If even a fraction of the security apparatus refuses, fractures widen. If regular forces turn against elite units, the result is not repression. It is civil war. Urban combat, competing commands, heavy weapons in residential zones. And this is not an ordinary state. This is a nation with ballistic missiles, proxy networks, and nuclear infrastructure. As internal order unravels, external actors watch closely. Allies hedge, rivals prepare, intelligence agencies monitor command integrity. The greatest fear is not collapse, but uncontrolled collapse. Deep underground, centrifuges continue spinning. Command chains grow uncertain. The risk of rogue action escalates. Desperate factions may see catastrophic leverage as survival. Meanwhile, regional dynamics sharpen. External strikes become tempting. Preemptive calculations shift. Maritime choke points become bargaining chips. The entire region edges closer to ignition. Even if the leadership survives this night, if the perimeter is restored by brute force, the strategic reality has changed permanently. The barrier of fear has been breached. The population has crossed a psychological threshold that cannot be reversed with bullets alone. Power that must be defended daily by terror is already dying. The residence that once symbolized absolute authority now resembles a bunker under siege. Allies quietly prepare exits. Loyalty becomes conditional. Silence becomes ominous. History teaches a grim lesson. Regimes at the end are often the most dangerous, not because they are strong, but because they have nothing left to lose. As darkness settles over Tehran, the question is no longer whether the system can return to normal. That possibility is gone. The question now is far more terrifying. When the smoke clears, what will rise in its place, renewal or ruin? And how much of the world will burn before the answer becomes clear? If this analysis helped you understand what's really happening, please give the video a like. It helps this report reach more viewers. Subscribe for clear, no-nonsense updates and deeper breakdowns as the situation continues to unfold. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next critical update. Events are moving fast and we're tracking every major shift. Stay informed, stay alert, and keep watching closely.